My name is Detective Pierce. I have walked down alleys where shadows seemed to linger longer than men. I have touched pages that whispered back when turned. I've learned to look past what is obvious, because too often the obvious is nothing but bait. Yet when I was called to the old planetarium on the north side of the city, I had the uneasy sense that what waited there was not a puzzle to solve, but a snare already closing. The Shattered Planetarium had been closed for almost 20 years. Built in the 1950s, it was once a place of marvel, children craning their necks beneath the domed ceiling as constellations glided overhead, adults whispering about how small and fragile we were under the sweep of the cosmos. Then the accidents began. A technician fell from the projection booth, impaled on broken glass. A fire started one evening without cause, though it burned only in the central chamber, leaving the rest untouched. The city shut it down soon after. Since then, it had become the province of vagrants, vandals, and urban explorers, until last week, when 3 students went in and never came out. Their families received strange calls afterward. Not ransom demands. Not threats. Just static, with a faint rhythm beneath it, like breathing. I was sent not because the department had faith in me, but because no one else wanted the assignment. When I arrived, the place rose above the skeletal trees like a broken lantern. The great dome was cracked, spiderweb fractures running from its crown. Through those gaps, I could glimpse a blackness deeper than night, though it was only mid-afternoon. The facade was a ruin of graffiti and mildew, the entry doors chained with rust that would break with one hard kick. But the caretaker was waiting. Her name was Mrs. Algren, an elderly woman hired years ago by the city to keep squatters out. She greeted me with a lantern, the flame weak against the building's looming silhouette. Her face was pinched, her eyes sharp. "You'll go in," she said flatly. It was not a question. "That's the job. They don't come out the same." "Meaning?" She hesitated, the lantern trembling slightly in her hand. "When the dome shattered, the stars didn't leave. They stayed. And sometimes they walk." I left her by the gate. Inside, the air was dry, dust thick as wool. My footsteps echoed on cracked marble floors. Posters from another era still clung to the walls, curling at the edges. Maps of constellations, announcements for shows long cancelled, journey to Saturn's rings, the mysteries of the deep sky. The images had faded, but the eyes of the figures painted there seemed unusually sharp, as if they had been touched up recently. The main chamber drew me like gravity. The dome arched above, fractured lines cutting across its surface like scars. Old projector machinery sat in the center, a massive contraption of lenses and gears, blackened by rust but not entirely silent. I swear I heard it shift when I entered, a grinding of unseen wheels. I set down my case, drew out my flashlight, and swept the beam across the seats where once hundreds had gathered. Dust motes swirled in its path. But there were footprints too, dozens, some small, leading inward. None leading out? I checked my watch. The second hand stuttered, then spun backward, then forward again. A trick of the magnetism in old wiring, maybe? But it didn't stop my pulse from quickening. I forced myself to methodical work, documenting the scene, sketching the pattern of prints. I noted that they did not scatter randomly. They all converged on the central projector, circling it like pilgrims at a shrine. I approached. The surface of the machine was cold to the touch, though the air around it was warmer. Beneath my fingers, the metal seemed to vibrate faintly, as if alive. I bent down and found a gap in its base, just wide enough for a hand to reach in. And I did. What I touched was not metal. It was paper. Thin sheets, curled, brittle. I drew one out. It was a ticket stub. Admit 1, the Shattered Planetarium. The date printed on it was tomorrow. I stood very still, the stub trembling between my fingers. Then something moved above me. The fractured dome was alive with light. Constellations burned across it, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades, all drawn not in projected luminescence but in crawling veins of silver fire. They twisted, shifted, broke apart, reformed. Stars bled across the cracks in the dome like wounds reopening. And then came the sound. Not the whir of machinery, but voices, hundreds of them, whispering in unison. Words I could not understand, syllables curved like symbols in an alien alphabet. My light died. The chamber plunged into starlight only, cold and merciless. From the seats something stirred. Shapes rose, human outlines but wrong, limbs too long, heads tilting at unnatural angles, their movements puppet-like. I counted at least a dozen, perhaps more, emerging from the dust. They were not bodies, not ghosts, but something cast in the shape of those lost here. One of them turned. Where its face should have been was only a void, and yet I felt its gaze pierce me. The paper in my hand grew hot. I looked down. The stub's ink had changed. Now, beneath the date, was a name. My own. I dropped it, but it clung to my palm as if burned into the skin. The whispers swelled, filling the chamber, a chant building towards something inevitable. The projector shuddered. Lenses turned without hands. And on the fractured dome above, the constellations shifted into patterns no astronomy had ever charted, shapes of cages, mazes, traps. The figures moved closer, silent as dust. I drew my revolver. My hand shook. But even before I raised it, I knew a bullet would be as useless here as a candle in a storm. And yet I fired. The shot cracked, echoing like thunder across the dome. For a moment the stars blinked out, the whispers ceased, and the figures froze. Smoke drifted from the projector, curling upward like the breath of something roused. Then everything returned at once. Louder. Closer. I realized then this was not a crime scene. It was a snare, exactly as I had feared. A net thrown across time itself. And I had stepped into its center. The smoke from my revolver hung in the dome like a veil. I backed toward the chamber's exit, keeping my light fixed on the shapes advancing. But the beam revealed only emptiness where they had stood a heartbeat before. I turned. They were already there. Figures, silhouettes against the ruined posters, blocking the hall. Not solid, not entirely, like the afterimage of someone you've stared at too long, their outlines bleeding into the air. The projector groaned behind me, and I could hear gears spinning without rhythm, grinding as though forced. I tried the door. It would not budge. The handle turned, but the frame seemed fused to the wall, as if the building itself had decided my leaving was not an option. My pulse hammered in my ears. I'd been in tight corners before, gunfights, collapsed tunnels, basements with only one way out, but this was different. This was not human. I spoke aloud, to steady myself. Detective Pierce, Case File Planetarium. Entry Log, 2134. I often did this on cases, dictating into the tape recorder. But my recorder was not in my pocket now. I still spoke, because silence was worse. I am in the main chamber. Projection system has reactivated. Possible trespassers in the building. Unknown number. Visibility low. The whispers rose again, threading through my words, as though mocking me. And in them, I thought I heard my own voice repeated back, fractured, multiplied, reshaped. I pressed onward, forcing myself down a side corridor. The walls here were lined with storage cabinets, glass cracked, papers spilled. Charts of the heavens, hand-drawn in meticulous ink. But the constellations were wrong. Their patterns twisted, the lines connecting stars forming spirals, cages, and labyrinths. I passed one case and froze. Inside, beneath shattered glass, a human face stared up. Desiccated, gray, lips pulled back from the teeth. It was mounted like an artifact, eyes sewn shut with copper thread. The plaque beneath read, "Specimen acquired, 1978. I stumbled back, breath caught in my throat. There were more, dozens of them, faces arranged in neat rows, some old and withered, others disturbingly fresh. All catalogued, all labeled. Not exhibits for children's education, but trophies. I forced myself to keep moving. The corridor opened into a smaller room, what had once been the projection control booth. The glass window was shattered, overlooking the main chamber from above. The machinery here was still intact, reels of film stacked high, reels with titles scrawled on their edges. The Birth of Stars, Voyage Beyond the Horizon, The Cage of Orion. One reel lay already loaded, half-spooled through the projector. Its film strip fluttered in a wind that did not exist. I leaned closer, squinting. Each frame was not an image of stars or galaxies, but faces. Faces screaming, silent and eternal, each one different. I staggered back. My hand brushed the control panel, and the projector lit. Light shot out, not into the dome, but into the air of the booth itself, filling it with floating images. Not constellations, but doors. Thousands of doors, some ajar, some closed, suspended in endless darkness. I could see behind some of them, glimpses of places I half recognized. An alley where I once chased a suspect. The kitchen of my childhood home. A hospital corridor I'd sworn never to set foot in again. And beyond other doors, things. Shapes that moved without form, shadows writhing in geometries I could not hold in thought. My stomach turned. Then one door opened wider. I saw myself. Standing in the booth, watching the film. But my reflection's mouth was moving, speaking words I had not said. And in its hand, it held the ticket stub. The one I had dropped. The reel snapped. The light vanished. I was alone again, the booth dark except for the red glow of a single switch still burning. I heard footsteps then. Not whispers. Footsteps, measured and heavy, climbing the stairwell that led up to the booth. I drew my revolver again. I had 3 rounds left. I aimed at the doorway. The steps grew louder, echoing as though multiple people ascended, though the pattern belonged to only one. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. Then the figure appeared. It was a man. Or had once been. His suit was decades out of date, patched and moth-eaten, his shoes polished but scuffed. His face was hidden by a mask shaped like a starburst, jagged edges radiating outward, covering his features. In his hand was a lantern. But its flame was black, swallowing light instead of giving it. He stopped in the doorway and spoke in a voice that did not echo, though it should have. "You are late." I steadied the revolver. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, as if the question was absurd. "The usher. You have a seat reserved." "I don't take tickets from the dead." His lantern pulsed. The black flame flared, casting shadows across the walls. In those shadows, I saw dozens of figures, all watching, all seated as though waiting for the show to begin. "You will," he said simply. The revolver felt like a toy in my hand. Still I fired. The bullet struck his chest, and stopped. Hung there, midair, as though suspended in glass. Slowly it rolled backward, falling at his feet with a metallic clink. He did not move. Only raised the lantern higher. The flame spread, filling the booth, drowning the light of my flashlight, swallowing the world. And then I was no longer in the booth. I was seated. The dome stretched above, stars blazing in unnatural constellations. Around me sat dozens of others, figures with no faces, with sewn eyes, with masks shaped like bursts of light. They all faced forward. The usher's voice filled the chamber. "Tonight's feature begins." The projector roared to life, and on the dome above, the film began to play. It was not stars. It was me. Every moment of my life unspooled across the sky. Childhood, mistakes, sins I had buried deep, all painted in flickering light. And I could feel them all watching, savoring, feeding. I tried to rise, but the seat held me fast, straps binding where none had been before. My hands were pinned. My breath shallow. The usher moved down the aisle, lantern swinging, his mask gleaming. And the whispers began again, layered beneath my own memories, words stitched into the fabric of my past. The dome cracked louder above, fissures spreading wide. Through them, something vast and waiting pressed close, eager to enter. And I realized this was not merely a haunted planetarium. It was a theater. And I had become its performance. The film did not stop. Frame after frame of my life reeled overhead, faster now, stuttering as though the projector could barely contain the weight of memory. The faceless audience murmured, a susurration of voices that did not belong to the living. Their whispers braided into one word, repeated over and over, encore. I thrashed against the straps, every muscle burning. They tightened with each movement, cords cutting into my wrists and ankles, as if the chair itself was growing roots into me. I felt would bite my skin, splinters burying deeper the more I fought. "Encore!" the usher repeated, voice calm, patient. He moved closer, lantern raised. The black fire inside it licked higher, casting ripples across the dome, warping the images into grotesque parodies of my life. Childhood scenes became pits of fire. The faces of my family blurred into hollow-eyed husks, their mouths sewn shut. I turned my head away, but it didn't matter. The sound of the film was inside my skull. Laughter where there should have been silence, sobbing where there should have been joy. "You don't belong here," I rasped, forcing my voice through dry lips. The usher stopped at the foot of my aisle, mask tilted in thought. Then he raised a gloved hand, and with a slow motion, snapped his fingers. The dome changed. Gone were my memories. The images now showed places, streets I did not know, houses left in ruin, doorways standing alone in vast fields. Each one filled with figures stepping through. Men and women, children, elderly, all of them stepping into light that bent the wrong way, light that swallowed them whole. And then, in one flickering instant, I recognized someone. A partner. My old partner, Henderson. Dead for 5 years now, a bullet in a robbery gone wrong. I saw him walking into one of those doors. His uniform torn, his sidearm at his belt. He did not look at me. He simply vanished into the glow. My chest seized. The usher raised his lantern higher. "You see. Every seat is filled. Every guest accounted for. All that remains is you." The black fire flared, and the straps across my body loosened. I bolted upright, staggering from the chair, revolver raised again though I knew it was useless. The audience did not move. They sat in perfect silence, their stitched eyes watching nothing, their presence heavier than any crowd I'd ever known. I stumbled backward, into the aisle, toward the exit at the far side of the chamber. My legs felt heavy, as though gravity had doubled. Each step was a battle. The usher followed, never hurrying, lantern swaying. I reached the door and shoved. It opened. For a brief, blinding second, I was in a hallway again, real, solid, lined with peeling wallpaper and broken tiles. My chest filled with air. I turned ready to flee. But the projector boomed once more, like a heartbeat echoing through the universe. The light caught me. I was no longer in the hallway. I was back in the dome. The audience erupted in whispers, now jubilant, insistent. The usher's voice threaded above them all. The reel is endless. You cannot walk out midway. A feature unfinished devours its actors. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. The whispers rose, pressing against my skull like nails. And in that flood of sound, I heard something new, a second voice. My own. Not from the past, but from somewhere ahead. Don't fight it, it said. You'll only make it worse. I staggered to my feet, scanning the rows. There, at the far end of the chamber, a figure sat apart from the rest. Me. Same suit, same revolver holster. But older. The hair at my temples was gray. His eyes, unlike the others, were open. And he was smiling. My stomach lurched. The usher inclined his head toward my double. The star of the evening. Every actor meets himself in the end. That is the encore. The other me raised a hand in greeting. Then he lifted something I recognized immediately. My badge. Not the one I carry now, but a tarnished, bent version, blood-stained across the edges. I shouted, voice cracking. What do you want from me? The usher's lantern dimmed, the black fire drawing inward, folding like wings. He spoke slowly, with a finality that left no space for denial. To remember. To be remembered. To play the real until the dome collapses. That is the purpose of this house. Above us, the cracks in the planetarium ceiling widened, stars bleeding through. But these were not constellations of our sky. They bent into patterns of cages, spirals, endless repetition. And as I stared upward, I felt the terrible truth settle into my bones. This place was not showing my life. It was writing it. The usher lowered his lantern. The audience leaned forward in perfect unison. My double stood, smiling wider. The next act was about to begin. The dome's cracks widened until they weren't cracks at all, but doorways, fractures in reality spilling pale, shifting light into the chamber. They pulsed like wounds, and through each one, I saw fragments of things that should never have existed. A schoolroom with desks all facing a wall of mirrors. A hospital ward where every bed was occupied by myself, each version breathing in perfect rhythm. A railway platform stretching into an infinite night, with no trains, only shadows waiting for departure. The audience stirred, restless at last. Their heads pivoted toward the rifts, necks creaking like rusted hinges. For the first time, they stood. 100 stitched eyes opened, black threads snapping as one, their sockets hollow but endless, like the projector's beam. The usher's lantern guttered, the black fire shrinking to a single coal. It is the turning of the reel, he said, voice rising with a new fervor. Every story must unravel before it ends. My double walked toward me, badge glinting with tarnished light, revolver hanging casually at his side. His smile was not malicious, but pitying, as if I were the one who didn't understand the rules of the play. You already know how this goes, he said. His voice was my own, but steadier, calm where mine cracked. You chase shadows, thinking you'll find truth. But the real doesn't care about truth. Only performance. Only the encore. The whispers pressed harder into my skull, a chorus of demands, encore. Encore. Encore, asterisk. I staggered back until my shoulders struck the cool curve of the dome. The cracks above poured their light down onto me, each beam seeking to pull me inside. I lifted my revolver, aimed at my double. Then maybe the show ends with me, I said. My finger trembled on the trigger. He didn't flinch. He only shook his head. Bullets don't stop a reel. They just write another scene. The usher's lantern went out. The chamber plunged into darkness, except for the projector. Its light swelled, no longer bound to the dome, flooding the chamber like a tide. In that blinding brilliance, the audience dissolved into motes of dust, drifting upward like ash. And then the reel shifted. It showed not the past, nor the fractured spaces, but something I hadn't seen before. A stage. A vast, wooden stage beneath a curtain of red velvet, swaying as if in a phantom wind. A single spotlight shone down onto a chair. My chair. The straps glistened wetly in the light. The usher's voice echoed in the dark, though I could no longer see him. The reel provides. The reel commands. The detective takes his seat. I shouted, though I could barely hear my own words. I'm not part of this play. I don't belong here. From across the light, my double stepped closer. Neither did I. Neither do any of them. But the reel remembers what the world forgets. That's why you were called here. That's why you can't leave. The floor beneath my boots shifted, softening. I looked down. Boards had become film. Strips of celluloid stretched in every direction, brittle yet endless, their frames glowing faintly. I was standing on the movie itself. My legs sank slightly with each movement, as though I were walking through quicksand made of images. I tried to run, forcing my body forward, but the celluloid coiled around my ankles, snagging and pulling tight. The revolver slipped from my hand, clattering onto the frames with a hollow metallic echo. My double crouched beside me, watching with grim fascination. You feel it now. How heavy memory becomes when it has nowhere else to go. I clawed at the strips, tearing them with my fingers. Each frame that ripped open released a burst of sound, cries, laughter, gunshots, whispered confessions. Moments that weren't mine spilled free, flooding the chamber. The usher reappeared, standing at the far end of the dissolving dome, lantern reignited with black fire that roared like a furnace. His voice boomed now, filling the cracks, the fractures, the abyss beyond. Detective. Choose your role. To sit or to burn. The words reverberated in my chest. I looked at the chair on the projected stage. I looked at the rifts spilling impossible visions. I looked at my double, waiting with patient eyes. And for the first time since stepping into the planetarium, I realized something that chilled me more than anything else. There was no right choice. Every path ended on the reel. And the reel had no ending. The cracks above split wide, and the world fell into light. The light swallowed everything. At first I thought it was death, an obliteration so total that even thought couldn't follow. But thought returned, slow and reluctant, like embers rekindling in ash. I opened my eyes to find myself seated, strapped into the chair from the reel. The leather bit into my wrists and chest. A spotlight pinned me down. Beyond its circle stretched only shadow, vast and impenetrable. Somewhere in the dark, reels spun. The sound was unmistakable, the rapid flutter of film through a projector. My heartbeat synced with the rhythm until I wasn't sure if the sound was mine or the machine's. The usher appeared first, his lantern burning with black fire. He walked without footsteps, gliding closer until he stood at the edge of the spotlight. His face was clearer now. Not blank, not featureless. It was my own. You see it now, he said. His lips curved into a faint, weary smile. You've always been the usher. Guiding others into their stories. Guiding yourself into your own. I struggled against the straps. If I'm the usher, then let me out of the damn chair. His smile widened. Every usher takes his turn. Another figure emerged from the dark. My double again, detective's coat, revolver, badge dull with tarnish. He circled me like a wolf, revolver tapping against his thigh. This is the part you never understand, he said. The real isn't memory. It isn't destiny. It's hunger. It takes everything that doesn't fit anywhere else. Forgotten crimes. Unfinished lives. All the loose ends. And it feeds them into itself. Then what the hell am I doing here? I shouted. The usher and my double spoke together, their voices braided into one. Because you chase what is lost. And what is lost chases you. The spotlight dimmed. Images flared across the darkness. My cases, every unsolved file, every body that never had an answer, every missing person whose trail ended in silence. I saw them all projected around me, each one burning into the walls of the void. You carry them, said the usher. But they do not want to be carried. They want release. The straps loosened suddenly, falling away like old snakeskin. I stumbled to my feet, heart pounding, revolver still lying on the stage. My double bent, picked it up, and held it out to me. Go on, he said. Fire. Tear a hole in the reel. See if the hunger will let you go. I gripped the revolver, weight familiar and comforting. I aimed at the images surrounding me, the cases, the faces, the endless archive of what could not be solved. I pulled the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder. The film tore open, spilling light and screams. The void shuddered, reels grinding, projector faltering. For an instant, I saw the dome again, shattered and incomplete. The fractures flickered, like wounds reopening. The usher's lantern blazed higher, black fire consuming him. He stepped into the flames willingly, his form collapsing into cinders. My double didn't scream. He only smiled, revolver still in his hand, as he dissolved into motes of dust, just like the audience before him. The reel fought back. Images whipped around me like blades, slashing across my skin, tearing at my mind. I raised the revolver and kept firing, once, twice, a dozen times. Each shot tore another hole. Each hole let in more of something beyond, wind, rain, night air. And then, suddenly, I was outside. I stood in the ruins of the planetarium, its dome shattered for real this time. Rain hammered down, cold and cleansing. The projector was gone. The audience gone. Only fragments of film clung to the ground like dead leaves, dissolving as water struck them. I staggered out into the overgrown courtyard. Dawn was bleeding into the sky, pale and unfamiliar. I half expected my double to step out of the mist, revolver raised. But there was nothing. Only silence. For a long while, I sat on the wet stone steps, revolver heavy in my lap. My hands shook, though not from the cold. I thought of the usher's words, of the hunger of the real, of the endless chase. And I knew this wasn't the end. Because the cases I carried, the unsolved, the forgotten, they weren't gone. They never would be. The real was only one version of the hunger. And hunger has many mouths. As the sun rose, I lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. Smoke curled into the damp air. My coat clung heavy to my shoulders. Somewhere, far off, I thought I heard the faint rattle of a film reel starting up again. I exhaled and whispered to no one. The show never ends.